You're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me is my co-host, Adam. How are you doing there, Adam?
Yeah, not bad, Aaron. It's nice to speak to you again. I think it's been a little while since we last spoke, and so yeah, it's been it's good. Well, it's going to be good to speak again and to cover another film.
Yeah.
Which is going to I think will prove to be very interesting both for ourselves and the audience.
Yeah, it's another good film. Last month was a good film, Chappie. Listeners, if they haven't listened to that show yet, should go back and check that out in the podcast feed. But this month we have another independent sort of film, which is Ex Machina. Am I pronouncing that right, Adam? Am I getting it right?
I believe so, yes. It is a Latin phrase.
Yep.
From Greek, I believe from classical Greek theatre.
Yep.
And I think what it essentially is referring to, it's a reference for a kind of a plot device that is used in theatre, where they will suddenly introduce like a character or event or some kind of other plot device that will solve an otherwise unsolvable problem and kind of allow the plot and the story to sort of continue and to move forward. Mm-hmm. I think it's often used in the context of a kind of a hopeless situation where some kind of plot device, be a character or whatever, shows up or happens and manages to turn things around and keep things going. Obviously, we can see this particular plot device in a lot of really, really bad sort of badly written scripts and badly written films where people have kind of just like the directors or producers have basically kind of painted themselves into a corner or what have you.
Yeah, just the impossible situations in movies that pop up all the time. And you're sitting there thinking, like, this would never happen and they couldn't get out of this, but, somehow they do. The characters get out of it and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. It's a movie.
Well, it's like, I think if anybody has seen Fast and the Furious 7, which I know you have, Aaron, which I also had the misfortune of watching the other day as well, it is full of these little plot devices. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. It's the most impossible situations somehow turning out okay due to the sudden introduction of some savior or some sequence of events which manages to turn everything around.
And the original Greek, I think, is Deus Ex Machina, and it has something to do. Right. Yeah. I think it translates God from the machine or machine. Yeah. Right.
I think the literal translation, or as literal as you can get from like Latin, I think is God from the machine. And I think what the reference was that in these traditional Greek plays, whenever they would want to present godlike figures, who would perhaps save the protagonists from certain death, the godlike figures would be sort of introduced onto the stage by wires or by some kind of mechanical device. And so, I think that's where it came from.
The machine, the wires, all the stage machinery. Like, look. Yeah.
The stage machinery, I think that's what it's referring to. I think the whole Deus or Do, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Deus or Deus Machina, is basically a god from the machine, and it's the whole kind of like plot device of
like a deity, Deus,
Yeah, exactly. In fact, you're probably right. It's probably Deus. Yeah, there we go. That would make sense. The god X, X. Yeah, there we go.
God Machina from the machine would be the machine, and X would be from,
So that makes perfect sense, So that's kind of it,
it's an appropriate title, too, because it plays that idea that God and the machine and all that.
And it also, I think, personally, and we'll get into this perhaps, is it plays into some of the, I guess, some kind of allegorical concepts that we see throughout this film, and that in some ways, I almost felt as if some of these characters and the way the characters were relating to one another was almost like some kind of play or some kind of stage. And I felt that because there was a lot of kind of acting going on, and then people were playing out roles. And so I feel that perhaps this whole title for the film and being Ex Machina was not just a reference to the transhuman theme of creating a god from a machine or God being materialized through mechanics or in technology, but also the whole concept of the stage and theatrics and of people playing roles. I think perhaps there's I haven't quite nailed it down. It's kind of an ambiguous one, but
I hadn't thought of that at all. But kind of like way that they were acting, and even the stage that they're on, they're kind of like they're pretty much in the same place the whole time.
Yeah, and they're all in front of a they're all audiences to one another because they're all watching one another on CCTV as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. And even the lighting is it's all like artificial indoor lighting for the most part, except for the exterior shots, which there are some. Actually, I'd like to jump to the exterior shots real quick, and an idea on that. They're in a spectacular natural setting. I think it's in Norway that they shot it. But it's just beautiful and amazing, and
it is,
it's the splendor of nature there. And then there's this little retreat that's owned by Nathan. I guess we got to introduce the character Nathan. He's the millionaire, billionaire CEO of a search engine company, and he's the guy who's working on this AI project that the other character Caleb comes to find, but by being whisked away from his job in the States to this amazing natural setting. I think there's some symbolism with the natural setting that they go into there.
Yeah, I think there's a use of juxtaposition there in terms of the high technology and high technological concepts which are dealt with in this film, being juxtaposed with these images of nature. And as you say, I think it was filmed in somewhere in Scandinavia, Norway, perhaps Finland, or what have you. Very, very beautiful scenery, and they just sort of keep cutting to these very, very serene natural settings, which are quite heavily juxtaposed against the highly technological setting in which the majority of the film takes place.
I think that they were getting at sort of the beauty and grandeur and even the creative power of that is nature. There's that. It's clearly beautiful, but it's also dangerous. You get the sense of that from the setting because there's these big waterfalls, there's ice. So you understand that it's really beautiful, but at the same time, it commands respect because it's a place where if you're out there left as a human with no tools or anything, you would likely die out in that setting. You know what I mean? It would not be an easy place to live, although it's beautiful. And the natural world is symbolic of, like the mother aspect of creation, the feminine creative principle that also ties back to a lot of concepts with technology, like man working with the mother nature and recreating it into this technological creation. So, and in the process of doing that, you're messing with the same natural forces, oddly enough, that are present in, that natural scene that we see. And again, it's beautiful, but it's dangerous.
Yeah, and that obviously is reflected very, very much in the central character of the film, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I suppose just to reiterate what you were saying is that in terms of the introduction of the film, we have this guy Nathan, who is the CEO of this. Basically, in the film, it's the equivalent to Google. It's called Blue Book, and it's the biggest search engine in the world. And he's kind of this young, comparatively young, high-flying sort of Silicon Valley executive. He's the kind of guy that you might expect to see in one of these big corporations or something. Sort of the young genius. And there are kind of some personality aspects to him, which I kind of found interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It was an interesting character. I liked what they did with it, actually, with him. Yeah.
There was a big juxtaposition between him, Nathan, the CEO of the company, and Caleb, the employee who has presumably won a competition to go and spend a sort of a weekend retreat at the CEO's house. This is the opening premise, and this is what we presume to be the case for the majority of the film. Spoiler alert. That's basically it. But what I did notice nervous was that when they introduced these two characters, so when this kind of young, I think he's 26, Caleb,
that sounds
when he flies out he has to get a helicopter because this place is so remote. When he flies out there and meets Nathan, I think there's a big contrast between the two characters in that Nathan is super rich, highly intelligent, obviously. I think he's quite cocky, but he's very,
Yeah, he's also an alcoholic too, because he's always he's always drinking a beer. He always has a beer in his hand. He's of like, he's crude in a lot of ways too, and he's kind of like he's a real straight shooter. He tells it like it is.
Yeah, I think he's he's one of these people who was he's very
forthright.
He's forthright. He's very forthcoming. It's kind of a, I don't know, humanistic ideology, I suppose. Well, I guess transhumanistic, but yeah, that's another thing.
Hedonistic, maybe?
Yeah, kind of hedonistic, I would say. And I suppose there's tinges of nihilism there, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But what I think the kind of contrast that I felt I saw towards the beginning there was that we have this young sort of programmer at the lower levels of the company who's been invited to go and spend this weekend, and he's kind of nervous. He looks a little bit geeky, and he's kind of unsure of himself compared to this Nathan guy who's super confident, and he's like
type A and type B personalities.
Well, yes, exactly. And he's kind of like well, put it this way, Nathan is very much an alpha. And
he's an alpha, he's an extrovert, and then Caleb is the introverted, nerdy guy.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I mean, compared to Nathan, who is kind of not only very, very intelligent, but is also like lifting weights, he's in shape, he's doing boxing, all this kind of stuff. He's super confident. Compared to him, at least in appearance and also in his personality in some ways, Caleb almost appears to be pubescent compared to him, and very unsure of himself.
Young. Yeah.
Yes, he's very young and insecure compared to him. And Nathan makes a big point at the beginning of the film to try and destroy that dynamic and say, look, can you stop thinking of me as your employer or as your superior, as your boss? Can we just be two guys hanging out? Mm-hmm. Because that's the way I'd like this weekend or this week to go. And so he makes a big point to sort of try and establish a rapport with him very, very early on in the film.
You know what I found interesting was the very first scene is where Caleb finds out that he won a little contest. It's all done through like the messaging on his phone. So you're seeing like text messages. Isn't it text messages?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it's implied that like, I forget exactly how it works because it's been a while since I've seen the film, but it's implied that the system he's using to do the messaging is somehow watching him. Am I right about that?
Yeah. We find that there's an implication there at the beginning, but we also find out that is absolutely the case later on in the film. Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting that like the introduction to the Caleb character was him typing away. That's the way he interacts with people, because his first way of telling somebody that he won was through text messaging. And there's people like behind him in the office. He's not actually going up to them and saying, hey, I won. He's texting people. And then people come into his office as he's doing that, and he kind of goes, oh yeah, hey, hello, That's his method of communication, is through this digital means.
Well, that could very well be the case. I mean, my interpretation of that particular scene was that it could also just have perhaps been posted on the company news board at the same time as he got the text, and everyone just kind of found out about it. But I thought
it was pretty well done. I liked that.
It still speaks to the relationship between him, technology, and Nathan, which becomes much more apparent later on in the film. But yeah, So I mean, to move on a little bit. I mean, we have the scenario with Caleb being shown around this massive retreat, which is kind of like it's part mansion, part R&D facility. It's kind of built into a rock. Part of it is kind of under the ground, I think.
It kind of fits into the thing we were saying with the natural setting, is that it's a piece of architecture that is made to look super high tech, but at the same time, and sophisticated. At the same time, it also blends in with nature. Like the rocks, the natural formations of the rocks are part of the structure of the building.
Yeah, they're inside the house. Yeah, they've got like rocks inside the actual living room. Yeah.
So it's really cool, and it builds on that same concept of, like you've got man's creation coming from out of the natural world, and they're actually one and the same, and they're beautiful, and yet they're also dangerous too, because lots of crazy, dangerous things happen in this place, don't they?
But it's he's being shown around this very, very luscious. Maybe that's not the right word. I think just grand and very, very high tech and expensive facility, which is kind of like a cross between, again, like a hotel room versus a home versus a R&D facility or something. Everything is glass and sort of brushed concrete. It's very little use of color for the most part, although there are some places where it's kind of colorful. But anyway, he's sort of familiarized with the environment, and he's asked to sign a disclosure form. And this disclosure form, which Nathan has asked Caleb to sign, is very, very what's the word? It's very, very restrictive. It's super restrictive. It's putting all of these legal provisions and precedents and whatnot in place to ensure that whatever he experiences during his time there, he does not repeat to anyone whatsoever, and does not communicate any of his experiences. And he has a moment of hesitation, but Nathan convinces him, sort of suggests to him that, he'll regret it, and that, he's basically, if he doesn't sign the sort of non-disclosure form, then he's going to be losing out on something monumental. And so he goes through with it. And at which point, Nathan reveals to him that he has built an artificial intelligence, and that he has basically got Caleb there to be the human component in the Turing Test.
Yes.
And if people are not familiar with the Turing Test, it was a test developed by Alan Turing. He was a mathematician who worked for British Ministry of Defence and British intelligence, developing a sort of cipher cracking machines during the Second World War.
They just made a movie about him, actually. I forget the title of the movie, but it was very popular.
It was. It was Benedict Cumberbatch played Alan Turing. Yeah. I saw that, actually.
So now people actually know who Turing is, whereas before most people had no idea who he was.
Yeah. I think that probably is the case. You're probably right about that. Okay. The basic sort of premise of the Turing test is that you set up a test environment where you've got a machine and a human being, and they communicate, although the human being does not know that it's speaking to a machine. And if they can get through a conversation and a certain number of questions, and the human being does not realize that it's talking to a machine and believes that it's actually talking to another human being, then that constitutes the passing of the Turing test, the success. So it means that
that shows that it's a true artificial intelligence. Like, oh look, it's good enough to fool you into believing it's a human. So it's an effective AI.
Yeah,
it's an AGI. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but of course they take it a step further in this particular experiment, because Nathan explains that actually what he wants to do was take the test a step further, and he wants to not rather than restrict Caleb's view of the artificial intelligence, he wants to introduce it directly, so that he is conscious of the fact that he was talking to a robot, and then test as to whether he will still come to see it as something that actually has consciousness, and will still come to empathize with it in the same way that he would a normal human being, regardless of the fact that he's visually staring at a robot. He feels that is a more true representation of the test for him and his own goals anyway. And so, that's basically where things pick up from. It's a sort of a series of conversations, or sort of interviews, if you will, between Caleb and this artificial intelligence he's created called Ava, which again is interesting. It reminded me of the film The Machine. Remember we did that?
What was the name of the character in that?
Well, it was Eva in The Machine.
Yeah, it's always some version of Eve. And it's obvious as to why that's the case. You barely have to say why.
I don't think that's. We'd have to bother going down there. Into that. I think there's a third example somewhere as well. I'm pretty sure we've covered another one.
You know what? The Pixar movie WALL-E. There's a female robot, and her name is Eva too. That's the love interest to WALL-E.
Well, there you go. Right.
It's always Eva.
I think we've seen this somewhere else. I'm not sure where, but I'm pretty sure we've seen either Eva or Ava or something like that in another sort of AI robot scenario. Mm-hmm. I can't put my finger on it. But,
maybe it's Johnny Five's girlfriend in Short Circuit 3.
I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as these interviews progress, what we see is Caleb, generally becoming quite fascinated and enthralled by the concept of being able to engage with this AI. And through the I mean, I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but through the series of interviews, Nathan encourages Caleb to start thinking of her less as a robot to be tested and more as a human being to get to know. And he sort of starts making these suggestions in terms of, well, I don't want you to give me feedback in terms of your sort of technological analysis of how I've made this or what improvements could be made, or I just want you to tell me how you feel about her,
that's right.
And I want you to find out how she feels about you. And so it's made quite clear in the fairly near the beginning of these interviews that Nathan has an agenda of some sort to try and get Caleb to bond with this artificial intelligence in some way. This very, very human-looking android. I mean, obviously, you can see the mechanical parts, but in terms of the face and the body language and all the rest of it, the voice, it sounds very, very human. And so, he tries to get to Caleb to bond with it.
Yeah, I think the dynamics between all the characters, Nathan, Caleb, and Eva, is really good, and it sets up real tension that's held for the entire film. There's this tension where the audience is going, okay, what's the real relationship between all these characters, and what are the hidden motives that each one of them has? Especially, the audience is especially made to be wary and questionable of Nathan, the Nathan character.
Absolutely. I mean, that's established, as you say, quite early on in the film. The motives of each character and the role that each character is to play in the grand sort of scheme of the plot is placed into question, and there is a definite air of suspicion established fairly early on, where it's made quite clear that things are not as they seem, that there is subterfuge, there is deception, there is manipulation, or something to that effect going on to some degree here. Although
the big event that kind of triggers that is the power outage. Caleb is asleep, or is he asleep, or is he still awake? He's in his room, and there's a power outage.
This is the funny thing. This is what the big clue is at the beginning: is that he's in his room, he wakes up, he can't sleep, and so he decides to use this remote control on the television and just basically have a look at all the different CCTV cameras around the facility, and he closes in on Ava just sitting there in her apartment, sort of cordoned off by this glass, and he sees her go up and sort of touch the wall to recharge, because she's got this kind of charging port on the wall, and when she does that, or briefly after she touches the wall to recharge, the whole power goes down for the whole facility, and the place goes into lockdown. And so, that's how that sequence comes about, and that's again a big clue as to the true relationships between all of these characters and the
it's really scary too, because he gets locked in there and he can't get out, so he's locked in his room. So he gets disturbed, and he goes to Nathan like, "Hey, what happened?" And Nathan's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about that. Those are just things that are happening." He tries to brush the whole thing off, but of course he can't, because it's scary. He's in a scary spot up there, and it's a scary situation. So,
he certainly is. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very big building. It's just that there's only
there's nobody in there except
there's no one in there. Well, there's an additional woman. There's he's got an Asian servant lady.
That's right. That's right.
And we'll get into we'll get into her, but later on. But but for all intents and purposes, she doesn't speak English. So it's just the three of them in there. And I mean, Ava herself is just locked in this sort of glass compartment. So essentially, it's just the two of them for the most part. And so it's kind of an intimidating scenario for him. And so he goes and seeks out Nathan. Nathan plays it down and says, "Oh, it's just just a technical problem I'm working on. Don't worry about it," etc. And things just continue to develop from there. And the power outages continue. And in one of these particular power outages, what happens is all the CCTV cameras goes down, so Nathan cannot watch the conversation between Caleb and Ava.
Oh, that's right. That's while Caleb is talking to Ava and conducting the Turing test. There is a power outage, and usually Nathan is watching the whole thing and recording it, but of course he can't when the power goes down, so then they get to have a private moment, him and the machine talking together.
And that's when the the whole issue of ulterior motives and suspicion come to the fore, and
it gets ramped up even more.
It becomes very, very clear at that point, because Ava tells Caleb in no uncertain terms that Nathan is not to be trusted.
Yes,
and that he's not his friend. Mm-hmm. And she's very, very convincing in saying this to him. And so Caleb is later on that day talking to Nathan over dinner. And they have a sort of a really awkward conversation, because Nathan asks him, "Well, what did you two talk about when the power went off? I couldn't see you." And he just tries to kind of play it off and say, "Oh, nothing," and blah 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 blah. And there's this kind of this tension is definitely ramped up, because we can see that
of tension, and the entire audience is suspicious of Nathan. He's always drinking, he's obviously not like he's got his problems.
Yeah.
And so you're just suspicious of like, okay, this guy's a bad alcoholic. What other bad stuff is he up to?
Well, yeah. And then we're given another clue at that moment in that particular setting when they're having dinner, because his Asian servant, I think Kyoko, her name is, comes and delivers some food, and I think she trips and drops something, and Nathan loses the plot with her and then starts abusing her really badly.
Yes.
And he comes across as a real idiot and like a real bastard kind of sadist,
bad guy.
And of course, there's a number of other quotes in the film where he comes across as being highly megalomaniacal and egocentric.
He's definitely like a major ego. There's a part where they're talking about like, Caleb says, "Oh yeah, you may have created a god, and the god would be the machine artificial intelligence." But Nathan's there saying, "Oh, that's cool. You're calling me a god." So he thinks he's the god,
Well, what happens is that they're when he first announces to Caleb that he has created an artificial intelligence, that they engage in discussion about what that means, and Nathan says to Caleb, he's kind of trying to stroke his ego and build rapport with him, and he says, "Well, if you want to be part of this, you're going to be center stage and one of the greatest defining moment in human history." And Caleb responds to him and says, "It won't be the greatest moment in human history. It'll be the greatest moment in the history of gods." And Nathan just loves that sort of little quote there. And he writes it down and starts repeating it and says, "Oh my God." And Caleb's going, "No, I didn't quite say that, actually." He's like, he completely ignores him. He's like, "Yeah, thanks for that, man. That was great."
And there's that same concept, God from the machine.
Yeah.
And it gets into all the deep philosophical stuff of, which one came first? Which one is the God? Is it the creator, the human that created the machine? Or is it the machine that has the superior intelligence that arises from out of the inferior intelligence of man? So it's like the who made who, which came first? That sort of philosophical idea, which always is fun to think about in these terms.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of that. A lot of those types of philosophical.
To Nathan, he's not seeing that whole philosophical thing. He's just like, "Oh yeah, I'm the god," because he's giving into his ego. So he's not seeing like the deeper side of the thing. Whereas Caleb obviously is. And then you've got the machine herself, which remains a mystery throughout the whole thing, and that's appropriate too, because the feminine creative aspect, that's always the mother of the mysteries concept. It's always a mystery of how that works, and so a lot of that sort of occult stuff going on and philosophical stuff, and should be no surprise really. It's to be expected in a film like this. But I suppose things continue to move on in terms of the series of interviews Caleb is conducting with Ava, and he, is, as we say, told by Ava that Nathan is not to be trusted. He sees other little bits of sort of circumstantial, anecdotal evidence to suggest that Nathan may be mistreating Ava in some way, and there's also lots of scenes when Nathan comes across as a real jerk, and so the tension is built, the questions are mounting, and throughout the course of this. These interviews, more and more is actually revealed to Caleb by Nathan about what is going on, and that starts by him showing him the lab. He shows Caleb the lab where Ava was actually created, and he explains the method through which he created her, and some of the takeaway quotes from that, or some of the sort of concepts were quite interesting, because he explains that
in terms of getting her voice, her facial expressions, her body language, all her affectations right. What he did as the CEO of Blue Book was he somehow hacked the entire world's mobile phone network. You know,
That's right.
basically he hacked into every microphone, every camera, and basically fed all of that biometric data in terms of people's faces and voices into one big supercomputer, and then averaged it out into some kind of algorithm to be, sort of incorporated into the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And there's another level to that, actually, which is a bit kind of creepy, but which is revealed later on. But nonetheless, we realize that she is literally an average, or she represents a literal mathematical average of the entire human population in terms of her biometrics, in terms of biometric data.
It's also kind of it's explained that the same technology inherent in the search engine that that's what the company was. It was a search engine company. It was used to create this artificial intelligence. And Nathan goes on to that's the real. That's what it's really good for. I mean, people who are just using the search engine aren't really thinking about the big picture. And the film, I mean, this is where the film does really good, I think, in lining up with reality. What's actually going on. And companies like Google are doing the exact same things, because they're the big search engine company, but that's what everybody knows is the Google search engine and all that, but they don't realize the AI projects that they've been working on for a long time.
I remember you reading out quotes from your Transistor Radio podcast some time ago, where you were talking about. I forget who from Google.
It was Larry Page, one of the co-founders. You get that Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and Larry Page is the one that's had a lot of interesting quotes about making AI and what he thinks about. Well,
he said God. He used the term God. He said we are creating a God. Did he not?
Yeah. I was looking recently for that quote again. I can't remember exactly, but to paraphrase, it's like he wants Google to become like the mind of God, is what he said. That's a paraphrase of what he said. And he basically says, yes, the goal is to make Google an AI, because that's what would make it the most effective search engine, because it would know exactly what the user was looking for before they even typed it out, basically. It's because it understands the user.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we see with Ava, and she essentially constitutes all of the data that Blue Book has been able to aggregate into some kind of artificial consciousness. But not only has, and this is revealed, I believe, at a later point in the film, because what happens is Nathan reveals that he had in some way set up this experiment, and that the real test in his mind was not really anything to do with the Turing test per se. It was more, he wanted to see whether he could create a robot that was convincingly human enough in order so as to turn another human against another human being.
Exactly.
So that it would side with the robot against another human. Because what sort of becomes apparent through the things that Ava says to Caleb in terms of Nathan not being trusted, and then Caleb sort of stumbles upon little other bits of circumstantial evidence to suggest that that basically Nathan has created Ava, and he's keeping her there basically as a prisoner, and that she's very, very unhappy. He also discovers a whole bunch of other sort of prototype robots that have been dismantled. He discovers that Ava is just a prototype, and that her CPU will be overwritten at some point, and so she will essentially die because she's just a machine. She's the property.
There's a love interest growing there too, and she's seducing him in a lot of ways, and so you got the damsel in distress situation there. And Caleb, wants to be the hero that saves her.
And what we realize is that this has been created. This whole situation has been manufactured as part of the test by Nathan. And what he's actually done is he's actually this is the weird bit. He has actually taken what he calls Caleb's porn profile in terms of all the pornography that he watches online. He has taken all of that data, taken all the biometric information from all of those women, and created an average, an approximation of all of that, and used all of that data to create Ava's face. And so, immediately Caleb would be attracted to her, and so he has set up Ava to be attracted to Caleb, and Caleb to be attracted to Ava.
Yeah, and the whole time Nathan's asking, like, what do you think of her? And he's trying to see if she is seducing him, and if he likes her or not, or what's going on there.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I mean, that's right from the get-go. He's trying to push that agenda, and it just becomes more and more apparent. He eventually explains to him that he did this, and that we realized that actually Caleb had not won a competition by any means at all. He'd been selected for his particular psychological profile.
Yeah, and again, that's the same search engine software that created that profile. So I love the commentary on search engines and how they are perfect for aggregating data on individual people and creating psychological profiles and using the data from seemingly endless users to create larger projects and things like that. So I thought that was really good in this film, that they made commentary on that.
Well, it's very, very apt. Yeah, it's very, very relevant. And they, again, it was used with great effect in this particular film because they literally created an artificial android who was in every other way as appealing as possible to the particular psychological profile of Caleb. And so she was literally created for him in many respects, and he was sort of selected for her, and that's what the true nature of the test was. And of course, this is explained by Nathan to Caleb that when Caleb starts to express some of his sort of suspicions, and I think he eventually he breaks out and says, "Oh gosh, something on the lines of how can I trust you, and what's going on here, and what are you not telling me, and all this kind of stuff." And Nathan explains to him that that this was all set up. She was created for you. You were selected for her. That this whole thing was to see whether you would become so you would sympathize with her and would become so sympathetic to her needs as another consciousness, or another conscious, sentient individual, that you would actually begin to distrust me as a human being and start to side with her and help her in her attempts to escape the facility. Because that's what eventually ends up transpiring, is that Caleb becomes so embroiled in all of the emotional dynamics between him and Ava that he agrees to be part of her sort of plan to escape the facility and the evil clutches of the controlling Nathan, who is more and more shown to be a sort of just a very, very sadistic scientist with almost no soul.
He's also abusive to women because he's created a bunch of other previous versions of Ava, and all he's done is sexually exploit them and then destroy them. And Caleb finds the footage of him doing that. So
and when we find that this Kyoko Asian girl, the servant who was really abusive to, was not actually as you say, not actually a human being at all, but just one of his former prototypes that he'd used literally as a servant and a sex doll. And that he had quite a number of these things, with just different sort of bodily features, blondes, brunettes, Asians, Western people, whatever, as basically his own sex slaves, and had very little, absolutely no regard as to whether they were actually conscious or not. And so the audience is, of course, drawn into really, really sort of being suspicious and
the thing is he's proves himself to be a bad person, and that's true. I mean, he's a bad, abusive guy, and so why should you trust him? Because really he doesn't deserve trust.
He doesn't. But the funny thing is that he wants to. I mean, he initially, in some ways, he plants little seeds of evidence to bring Caleb to that very conclusion. So although he is a very sadistic, megalomaniacal egocentric individual, he nonetheless is willing to concede to that and to encourage the belief in that on Caleb's part, and as part of the experiment. However, what he doesn't realize is that, and this is, I guess, this is pretty much the end of the film here. But what he doesn't realize is that through all of this testing and this huge social experiment which he'd set up, this new artificial intelligence he'd created, Ava, had actually seen right through all of that. And not only was Nathan manipulating Caleb, but Ava was also manipulating Nathan and Caleb.
She was manipulating everybody.
So
she was the most intelligent AI creation yet. She is the most intelligent version and the most dangerous version. And Nathan hints at that. But Caleb, of course, doesn't see that because he just sees the beautiful potential of like, oh yeah, you're creating a god. Caleb is very much the optimistic, sort of youthful.
He's kind of the willing fool.
Yeah, he's definitely the willing fool going through here because he doesn't know what's going on. But, he wants to, he's an idealist. And he'd be the ideal transhumanist, too, for the Transhumanist Association. Be like, yeah, this is the future. Everything's going to be wonderful. Everything that Ray Kurzweil says about this is going to come true. Now it's just up to me to, let this technology loose when that's possible to do. And it's literally possible within the plot of this movie. So, what's he going to do? He lets the AI free, basically.
Well, yeah. But I suppose the darker twist of that, and this is kind of where I felt the film maybe went a little bit sideways in some ways, and it's kind of hard to hard to verbalize exactly why that is. But I felt that the sort of the tone of the film changed when this happened. But there's a scene where Nathan is essentially revealing sort of everything. There's the moment of great revelation, the revelation of the method, where Nathan reveals absolutely everything to Caleb towards the end of the film, and Caleb realizes that he's been a pawn in this game the whole time. There's even a point where he questions his own existence. He's in the mirror. He cuts himself with a blade to see if he'll bleed,
right.
And so he's obviously been messed with to the point where he's wondering whether he's real or not anymore. So there's the whole, it's got to the point where the boundary between, human and machine and who is who and who can you trust and identity and all these questions have become so blurred that he's actually gotten to that point. But what happens is, he I think reprograms the doors in the facility to open rather than close during during a power failure.
Yeah.
And so Ava goes ahead and triggers the power failure, and then so instead of the doors closing, they all open. Ava then there's a kind of a confrontation where Nathan tries to stop Kyoko and Ava from escaping, but they kill him.
Yeah, they kill Nathan. Yeah,
they kill Nathan. Yes, they stab him, which is kind of a very, very cold scene. But in some ways, it's like we feel as if he's gotten what's coming to him. But in other ways,
he gets what he deserves. But at the same time, it's like, oh man, you can tell that the way that the machine kills him is one that kind of lacks empathy. If a human being kills another human being, it's not that same kind of dynamic. It's just a machine. It's like a human killing an animal that doesn't care for her or something.
Well, yeah, it's like if it was a human killing a human, there'd be passion and rage involved. Whereas in this particular scenario, she's simply removing him as an obstacle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. Although she purportedly feels emotions, she has no emotional investment in that particular act. She just does what needs to be done.
Well, that's the whole question. That's the whole question throughout it too. Does she actually have emotion, or is she faking emotion?
Or she's simulating emotion? Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. I thought the film did a good job in that.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, that is the big question with AI. That is the fundamental question at the heart of all AI research. When you think about it, is how can you determine simulation from reality? How can you determine
when it comes to emotion? Is a machine just pretending to have emotions because they understand how, it understands how to act? Back to the Greek theater, Deus ex machina or Deus ex machina, they're just acting. Okay, this is what a human does when it acts this way, so I'm going to act that way, and then they'll react to me. And it's just
It's a series of programmed algorithms rather than like creative conscious decisions, and that's always been the heart of all AI research, is this whole concept of, well, a machine could verbally tell us that it is aware of its own existence, and it could ask us questions which would indicate to us that it is aware of its own existence. But how can we prove that those verbal assertions are not just pre-programmed algorithms that have been written in response to our questions?
Yeah, exactly, because it knows what to say when, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think that the film does a good job, actually, in kind of making this point, in that, Caleb sets Ava free, and she kills Nathan. Okay, yeah, that's the one thing. But she also locks Caleb in there and leaves him in there,
so it's the betrayal
to die.
Yeah, because she completely betrays him, and that's kind of the big twist, I suppose.
Yeah, that's definitely the big twist that you don't see coming. And I don't know. The thing that I really liked about that was that it does show that an AI could just fake human emotions and, attachment and love, and just feign all that to get its own way with people. And it doesn't care. It doesn't have emotion. It just is, looking out for its own self-interest, which we can't even understand what that self-interest is all about, because it's totally different.
Well, that's funny you mention that, because that's the argument that Nathan makes to Caleb when Caleb is engaged in dialogue with Nathan about the whole concept of what these things actually are, and why are you sort of locking them up, and are they conscious, and what's going on here, and he's kind of revealing to all the true extent of this big social experiment to him. They get into this whole debate over that very, very question, whereby Nathan is basically trying to say that is the case.
Yeah, and the film basically works out to prove that to be true. And it's funny that conversation is the first time that Caleb really sees things from that perspective. The whole time before, he's getting wrapped up in falling in love with Ava. He didn't think of that as a possibility because he wasn't really able to. But at the moment where he realizes that is a possibility, it's too late, because he's already let her out and nobody can do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the exact point at which she is escaping is the point at which Nathan tells him, "Do you not realize that she has been manipulating you this whole time?
Yeah,
because she knows how you were going to respond to certain emotions.
Yeah,
she knows she knows that she can engender sympathy and allegiance from you by using her beauty, her sexuality, etc." And that you're basically being played. But of course, what Nathan doesn't realize is not only is Caleb being played, but also is he. And that trying to set up this test, she has not only passed the test, but she's beaten it and turned it back around on them.
Yeah, because Caleb was able to sneak around on Nathan and find a way to get those doors to unlock without Nathan realizing it. So I guess you could say that Ava was the one masterminding the whole situation there, and it worked out, and it would make sense if she's the super intelligent one among them that she'd be able to pull that off. And then she's led out into the greater world. She takes a helicopter, she flies out of the fabulous serene setting of Norway into the bustling city, and that's where it kind of ends, where she's taking in the world at large, and who knows what comes next. She
goes and finds sort of this sort of artificial skin to place over her mechanical parts, so that she literally does look no different than any other human being, albeit almost anatomically perfect. But she sort of puts the skin on and then puts a dress on, and the helicopter that's coming to pick up Caleb, she just kind of goes and sits in it instead, and no questions are asked, and she's flown off and ends up standing on a corner in New York City or something, watching traffic or whatever the scenario is.
Mm-hmm. She mentioned earlier in the film that Caleb asked, what would she want to do the most, and she said sit on a street corner.
Yeah,
that's what she said.
They were talking about the concept of sort of going out together one day, and that's how she hooked him in emotionally. Was saying, can we go on a date together? Can I get out of here? Can you let me out of here so that we can go on a date together, basically?
Yeah.
And so very obvious emotional manipulation going on there on her part, for sure.
Yeah. And the reason was she just wanted to see people and what they do, and I guess she's being honest in that, because she's trying to figure out what people are all about the whole time. So I don't know. I thought the film was really good in actually bringing that possibility to the forefront of this whole AI concept of like, okay, what would an AI be?
Yeah.
And if it's capable of emotion, is that emotion genuine? And if it's not, then what could be the ramifications of that? I love that sort of question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it asks all these deep, fundamental, pivotal questions that the dialogue on AI and transhumanism is so full of. I mean, this is the stuff that people debate and have debated philosophically for hundreds, if not thousands of years. What does constitute consciousness? What is it? How can we define it? It can't really be quantified scientifically as we know it, but it somehow does exist. And so I think the film definitely did a good job in asking all of those questions without really dragging you toward any particular conclusion. Because at the end of the film, although she does, it is revealed that she has been essentially, she was supposed to be the test subject. However, she was really using, she was the one in control, basically. She was, the experiment was her own.
The harshness with which she treats Caleb, just locking him in there to die, makes you dislike her. And
of course.
So I personally think that's good because it makes you go, okay, like, if an artificial general intelligence ever pops up, should I just fall in love with it, or would that be a foolish thing for me to do?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, and I think that's probably a good example of one of the things that they did do well in this film was show you how easily people can be duped and people can be convinced and emotionally swayed and influenced by basic, predictable and replicatable actions and behaviors. And
that's not the way a human thinks. A human doesn't think when they're falling in love with someone. They don't think of, oh yeah, this is just a simple set of processes and behaviors. It's like, no, you get all caught up in the emotion because you have emotion. You're not like quantifying it and like turning it into equations. But it would make sense that a living machine would do things in that manner. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that would be its MO. That's the way it works. That's the way a machine works, and a human works on a more emotional level.
Yeah, I mean, presuming that this thing still uses, some kind of conventional computing, then it's ones and zeros. It can only operate on yeses and nos. I mean, on the assumption that it's not some kind of quantum supercomputer or something like that, which can use, I don't know, advanced versions of, I don't know, fuzzy logic or
it gets
whatever.
All theoretical at that point.
Yeah, it gets all theoretical, but I mean, and it asks I suppose it poses the question of, well, what is emotion, and we have a scenario where we can at least define human emotions, but perhaps an AI might have emotions, but just ones that are different from us and that we couldn't understand.
Yep.
And that perhaps that it does really have or embody some kind of genuine emotion that I suppose we could relate to on one way, but it may not abide by the same moral codes that we would, in that she, although, Caleb does nothing but be good to her and support her and try and fight for her. I'm not going to use the term human rights, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, he fights for her. He's the one who gives her freedom, and then
and she betrays him.
She locks him up.
Yeah, she totally betrays him at the end. And so, again, I think it does a good job of really illustrating how easily people can be swayed into just sort of losing their own judgment through emotion. And
it also brings it back to that concept of the cold, uncaring aspect of nature, which is beautiful and it can seduce you, but can be completely void of caring whatsoever. It can
absolutely.
It can just kill you because it doesn't have emotion.
Yeah, well,
it's
exactly.
Nature. Nature doesn't have emotion. Yeah,
exactly. It's not evil, and that's. I think it's a very, very that's very well observed because, as you say, the film is interspersed with all these sequences of very beautiful natural landscapes, but ones which are also quite dangerous. They're like glaciers and cliffs and things like that. It's all very, very grand and beautiful, but at the same time, it could kill you in an instant.
Oh, yeah.
With no malice, with no evil.
Yeah, it doesn't care either way.
It doesn't care either way.
Doesn't care.
It just is.
It wasn't because it was mad at you or because... it just is. It's just how it is.
And so she almost is, a kind of a personification of nature in many ways.
Yeah, and the female creative brought to literal life.
Yeah, she's the personification of Mother Earth in a way, I suppose.
Yep. Yeah. So if that that creative essence somehow came to have a consciousness, it could come to be like that. Yeah, I think they were definitely saying that, and they're doing it with picking the settings that they did and all that stuff. And I thought that they did a really good job with all that. And I like the fact that they did the commentary on Google. Obviously that they were talking about Google. I'm sure that some people noticed that, and that was good.
Yeah. Well, I think Google and Facebook, because you've got the company's called Blue Book, so that, the whole book thing is obviously in there deliberately, and so I think it's just Facebook, Google, YouTube. Is there any real separation between them at all anymore? So it's a play on that whole. That whole sort of group of concepts together.
Blue is a word that you typically see in a lot of AI projects too. You got Blue Gene, you got Deep Blue. These big supercomputers that are trying to create their
you do.
With. It's always blue something or other.
That's right, and you'll notice a lot of the like the lighting in a lot of high technology is blue as well. So if you look at any gadget from a sci-fi film, any piece of high technology from a sci-fi film, it'll be silver and blue, always silver and blue, and just as Ava is in this film.
Yeah, all the high-tech companies use it, too. IBM.
Yeah, they call them blue-chip companies, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But there's it's definitely alluding to the interests like Google and Facebook and all these big tech companies in Silicon Valley, and the fact that then the whole concept
there's more there than meets the eye. There's more
exactly
than just a search engine company.
You just think about the amount of data that a search engine like Google would be collecting, and the power that would come with that. It's almost immeasurable. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what she kind of personifies on a intellectual level, is almost the compilation of the entire of human history, really. Mm-hmm. And this is being done through these search engines.
And God out of the machine. Yeah,
God out of the machine. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got we come back to the beginning in the title where we've got, the ex machina and sort of God from the machine. So the machine creates the God, and the God is machine-like in some ways as well. But again, I also felt that there was some kind of allusion to the fact that this thing was a big social experiment, and it was kind of a play, and that people were playing roles in some way.
Yeah,
and again, I can't nail that down as to exactly how that structure works definitively, but I feel that there was a kind of a nod to it in some way.
Well, it's interesting because the whole plays and theater, the theater is the altar to Dionysus, and then you've got Nathaniel being kind of a Dionysian character. He's literally drunk the whole time.
Yeah,
Dionysus, the god of drunken
Well, he's
revelry.
super nihilist. Yeah, Dionysus nihilism. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So Nathan's playing that sort of God character. So he's definitely the father god, and then Ava would be the mother, the feminine creative principle. He's the masculine, and you've got it all happening within this theater type scenario, which is again reminiscent of Dionysus and revelry and the whole idea that everything is an act and nobody knows what's real. Caleb, the whole time, he's trying to figure out what's going on because he doesn't know, because he's, is as an actor, what is his role that he's to play? He's trying to figure that out the whole time.
Yeah. And of course, we've got the whole issue of the CCTV as well, and that everything that goes on within that facility and is basically is under surveillance. There's
so
a
it's a show
in every
of
room.
sorts. So it's like a TV show.
Yeah,
almost.
everybody's watching everybody else. No one quite knows exactly what the other is doing or what the true motives are. They're all kind of manipulating one another. So it very much is like a stage. And there's of course these moments when the cameras go down and they're not acting anymore. They're not acting for the cameras. So it's kind of they go off stage for a moment there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, a lot going on in this film, but I think let's leave it at that because I think we covered everything that we really need to cover, and I think this is a good review today, Adam.
Yeah, it was a good review. Again, I'd encourage people to watch this film because there are lots and lots of interesting little takeaway quotes and references and allusions to things in the real world, which are very, very, very interesting. And there's lots of allegorical meaning in it as well. So it's quite a loaded film in a lot of ways, but also a very, very well done film that makes a lot of good observations and raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was. I enjoyed the film and I enjoyed the review, and I hope other people will enjoy the film and will enjoy what we've discussed today.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't subscribe to this podcast, be sure to do so. We've got an RSS feed, and you subscribe through iTunes or Stitcher Radio, all from our website at tmpodcast.com. So I hope people will check that out.
Yeah, I hope they do. The website's coming along. We are continuing to add new content to it, and that is just going to continue. As always, there are always ideas in the pipeline, and we'll be doing perhaps a little bit more than just one podcast a month. In the coming
we'll
months.
see. We're talking about stuff, so we'll see how things go.
Yeah.
So definitely subscribe and keep checking the website, and look forward to more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's been a pleasure talking to you today, Aaron, and I shall look forward to talking to you next time when I believe we will aim to at least review the film Tomorrowland, so people can look out for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that should be a good one. All right, Adam, it's been great as always. Take care now.
Okay, right. Take care.
Today's episode of Themes and Memes was recorded on the 7th of June, 2015.